You understand that I do not think that the means of production should be owned by the state.
Marx had 10 specific planks for his party. I bet you agree with a couple of them, maybe even half. So it's worth noting that you may be closer to Marx than you thought.
But that doesn't mean there aren't problems, and any solution to these problems that isn't free market capitalism isn't Marxism.
Marx was writing specific prescriptions for his moment in history. His recommendations were just one manifestation of putting the collective over the individual. While today's solutions from the left are not technically Marxist, they are collectivist. However, these words are often used interchangeably because of their interwoven history.
That would be a good thing for the world. I think the world is a better place when there is less difference from the top to the bottom. And if that's the case, if we have any desired outcome, and I do think that would be better than not, then if we were going to create a system from scratch to ensure freedom, and I know that sounds counterintuitive, but I'll explain it in a minute, then we could do better than the one we've got.
Absolutely. We really could do better than the system we have. However, to fix inequalities of income, you first need to create inequalities of power. And this really is the downfall of leftist philosophy. The government is just a tool. Sargon wants to use it to make people's income more equal, but once you create that power, stronger people with more time and more gain come in and bend that power to their own ends. This is how the mega rich pay almost nothing in taxes, and why Costco is exempt from many of the regulations that normal people have to follow. The state is just a tool. It can be used for good and used for evil. The current wealth inequalities are actually manufactured by the political class. Wealth inequality was on the decline and only really started growing with government power in the late 70s. As anyone might expect, if the government has the ability to redistribute wealth, the powerful are going to redistribute it to themselves. While there may be a better system than the one we live in, government power is not going to get us there.
We genuinely could. The people at the bottom of the system at the moment do not have what you would consider freedom. They don't get up in the middle of the day and make their fucking videos. They get up early in the morning and they go and work in a shit job all day until God knows what time when they leave. I've literally been there. It's the worst fucking thing. And it's soul destroying. It's fucking difficult to get out.
I think it's important to do a quick self-inventory to make sure your personal feelings are not clouding your judgment. Life sucks. That's the nature of things. But you need to stay objective. Marx was an economist. He understood that inequality was linked to production and invention. However, he argued that in 1849 the human race had more productive capabilities than the rest of human history had combined, and that there was no more need for the aggressive growth that the Industrial Revolution was producing. If we had imposed government regulations on wealth back then, we never would have had all the progress we've seen in the last 160 years. In fact, this is actually the story of almost every culture in human history. Most of them invent and use technology to gain power, and then the innovation is put to a stop in order for the rulers to maintain power. You can even see it in modern day places like the Soviet Union or even Detroit. I think Margaret Thatcher said it best.
I give way to the honourable gentleman.
There is no doubt that the Prime Minister has in many ways achieved substantial success in the economy. There is one statistic that I understand is not, however, challengeable, and that is that over her 11 years, the gap between the richest 10% and the poorest 10% in this country has widened substantially.
That's right.
How can she say at the end of her chapter of British politics that she can justify many people in a constituency such as mine being relatively much poorer off, much less well housed, and much less well provided than it was in 1979? Surely she accepts that is not a record that she or any Prime Minister can be proud of.
Mr. Speaker, all levels of income are better off than they were in 1979. But what the honourable member is saying is that he would rather the poor were poorer, provided the rich were less rich. That way you will never create the wealth for better social services as we have. And what a policy! Yes, he would rather have the poor poorer, provided the rich were less rich. That is the Liberal policy. Yes, it came out. He didn't intend it to, but he did. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
I'm extremely grateful. The Prime Minister is aware that I detest every single one of her domestic policies, and I've never hid that.
And I think that the honourable gentleman knows that I have the same contempt for his socialist policies as the people of East Europe who have experienced it have it for theirs. I think I must have hit the right nail on the head when I pointed out that the logic of those policies are they'd rather have the poor poorer. Once they start to talk about the gap, they'd rather the gap were that. Down here. That. Not that. But that. So long as the gap is smaller, so long as the gap is smaller, they'd rather have the poor poorer. You do not create wealth and opportunity that way. You do not create a property-owning democracy that way.
I have a funny feeling you haven't read Thucydides. Go and read the Melian Dialogue. This is why I'm not a libertarian, because what you're saying is that the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must.
Sargon, I get it. Your name is Sargon of Akkad, but the original Sargon ruled over less territory than the Democratic Republic of Congo. While there are still things we can learn from the ancients, we know much more today than they did. They had no understanding of economics, but almost everything in modern politics is related to this science. Ironically, the quote by Thucydides more accurately describes state power. The strong get into power and they do as much as they can, and everyone else is forced to pay up or change their behaviors to what the rulers decide. In a free market, a strong person might want to only pay you $5 an hour, but you can say no. All parties do what they can, and everyone suffers the natural human condition equally. The common rejoinder to this is that some people can only get that $5 an hour job. If this is true, then that's their best option, and the policies that you advocate are actually going to take away this person's best way of surviving. Think about it. If state regulations make your favorite snack go from $5 to $15, you don't have to buy it. You probably will just go on without your snack. This is true of labor as well. When minimum wages are set above a person's actual productivity, the boss just goes on without the extra labor. Lastly, doesn't this sound a lot like Thucydides? You do what you can, you get into power, raise the minimum wage, and everyone else has to suffer the consequences.